Hi, I'm Jada McBride, and for the week 4.1 graded assignment, I chose the 7.7 case study, Menorah versus Illinois High School Association. Facts of the case: the plaintiff is Menorah, happens to be one of the parents of one of the athletes involved in this case. And then the defendant is the Illinois High School Association. So basically a brief overview of what happened in this case. Two Orthodox Jewish high schools, Yeshiva and Academy. Their basketball players and the parents of those players are arguing the right to wear their headgear during athletic events in regards to their religious freedom. These players right now, there is a law of a rule of the association that forbids basketball players to wear hats or any headwear, with the sole exception of a headband that's no wider than 2 inches while they're playing. So they basically have this in place in case one of the players trips or slips, or they get in a scuffle and they fall and then end up injuring themselves. So basically this rule is set in place just to prevent injury, and the high schools and the athletes and their parents believe that it doesn't line up with their religious freedoms. So the plaintiff's arguments: the principles of Orthodox Judaism require members to cover their head at all times. The only 3 exceptions are when they are unconscious, immersed in water, or in imminent danger of loss of life. So if it is not in any of those times, if they practice Orthodox Judaism, they are required to have something on their head covering it. And so basketball does not really fall into one of those exceptions, and so the plaintiff thinks that something needs to be changed in order for the athletes to continue to play basketball. The participants and their parents believe covering their head at all times is a sign of respect to God. So all of the plaintiffs who are arguing this rule of the association fully believe that covering their head at all times is a respect to God, and they do not see why they should have to take it off simply to play basketball, which is also another freedom that they have. And then the last one: basketball is the only interscholastic sport that the 2 schools participate in. So right now, currently, Yeshiva and Academy both only practice basketball. That's the only sport that they have. So they feel as if this rule isn't changed and the athletes have to choose, that ultimately they're going to be missing out on an opportunity to get involved and to play a sport. The defendant's arguments: so the Illinois High School Association says that Yeshiva and Academy have been with the Illinois High School Association for years, and their members have worn yarmulkes secured with bobby pins on every occasion except for 2. Academy was challenged by the refs on a couple of occasions, but ultimately the decision to let the team play without their yarmulkes was up to the head coach. The referees on those 2 occasions simply could not disobey the rules, and they wanted to make sure that they were following the rules. But every other time that these 2 schools have participated in an Illinois High School Association event, they have been allowed to have the yarmulke secured with bobby pins on their head while playing. And then their second argument is that the IHSA adopted a set of model basketball rules from the National Federation of High School Associations. So basically what they're saying is that this national federation had rules set in place already. Granted, the IHSA got to choose which ones that they implemented, but they went ahead and just went with the draft model that the National Federation of High School Associations had, because they thought that it was sufficient enough and that the rules that they wanted to go ahead and follow all of the rules that they had set in place. So the court findings: the plaintiffs were asked to propose an alternative, more secure method of covering the head, since they know much more about Jewish law. The court just couldn't see. They understood that it was their part of their religious freedom to wear something, but they just could not come to agreement on what it was going to be, because for some reason the whole argument of this case was that yarmulkes aren't supposed to be secured with anything. They're supposed to simply be placed upon the head. And so implementing bobby pins into that is also another risk for the IHSA, because they are only allowed soft barrettes, which also got taken away right before this case was implemented. So IHSA says, well, bobby pins are also dangerous. You can't have anything on your head, but then you definitely can't have two things that aren't allowed on your head. And so they think that the only way to solve this would be to let the plaintiffs, which would be the parents and athletes and two Orthodox Jewish high schools, they want them to think of an alternative method, something that they can put on their head that would allow them their religious freedom, but also allow them to play basketball at the same time, because they didn't want to take that right away. And then if at the oral argument they find that the Jewish religious law permits a more secure head covering than simply securing a yarmulke on top of the head with bobby pins, that it can also be remanded. So this whole case ended up being vacated and remanded ultimately. Implications. I just said that the Illinois High School Association needs to be aware of the member schools they have when implicating the rules. So to me, when reading this case, it just simply sounded like IHSA went off the National Federation rules and didn't really change anything of their own. They didn't really take the time to consider all of the member schools they have. Granted, there are 785 member schools, I think, but they didn't really... IHSA has public and private schools, so these private schools and these two schools that are Orthodox Jewish high schools weren't really considered in this whole rule that was implicated simply for basketball. And so I think that they just need to be aware of the schools that, they have in their association, and tweak or change the rules based on that, or implement an exception if they run into something like that, and communicate with the National Federation. I also said IHSA should make sure all referees and officials are aware of and follow the rules. So as I mentioned earlier, the two high schools, Yeshiva and Academy, both got away with wearing the yarmulkes during all season, except for on 2 occasions. And on those 2 occasions are when the referees were aware of the rules and decided that they could not forego them, and they wanted to implement it simply so they wouldn't run into issues later on down the road. And so to me, it seems like their officials and referees who are certified aren't fully aware of the rules that IHSA has implemented, and that they need to know that, hey, headwear that is wider than 2 inches is not allowed because of the risk of injury. And really only on 2 occasions did a referee catch that. Last thing I said was that the athletic directors of both high schools involved should know the rules too and express concern prior to the issue. So the athletic directors of Yeshiva and Academy are also kind of at fault, because as an athletic director, you need to know what rules you're going to be running into. And if you are an Orthodox Jewish high school and you practice those things, and you know that your student athletes believe in wearing and covering their heads at all times based on their religious beliefs, and you see that there is a rule in the handbook stating that during basketball, which happens to be the only sport you participate in, nothing can be worn on the head 2 inches bigger than 2 inches wide. I think the athletic director is then responsible for bringing it up to the Illinois High School Association and saying, at the beginning of the year, before anything ever happens, hey, we noticed this rule and this is going to be a conflict of interest for my team. Is there anything we can do to get this changed? Can we speak to the National Federation about what we can do about it? Things like that.